Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more soak rates. Today we are going to be diving back into book 4. I'm not sure if we are going to get through book 4 or not, but we are still in the search for the definitions of the virtues. We have just finished with courage, and now we are going to explore some more. So, then I accept that this is what courage is where we left off. And indeed, you should accept it, said I, as being civic courage at any rate, and you will then be right to do so. But we shall, if you wish, give a better exposition on this on some other occasion. At the moment, we are not looking for courage, but for justice. And for that inquiry, in my opinion, this is sufficient. That is fine, said he. Then there are, said I, two remaining qualities that we need to discern in our city: sound mindedness, and the reason for our entire inquiry, justice. Yes, certainly. Now, how may we find justice so that we do not have to trouble ourselves with sound mindedness anymore? Well, said he, I do not know, nor do I wish justice to be revealed first if we will not be considering sound mindedness anymore. But if you wish to gratify me, consider this before justice. Yes, indeed, said I. It is only right that I should wish to do so. Consider it then, said he. All right, so we're doing sound mindedness. Consider it I must, and from our present vantage point, it looks more like a concord and harmony than the previous ones. How so? Presumably, said I, the sound mindedness is a kind of order and a mastery over certain pleasures and desires, as people say when they are using the expression stronger than oneself, the manner of which I do not understand. And other expressions of this sort express a trace of this, do they not? Yes, absolutely, said he. Is not the phrase stronger than oneself quite comical? For whoever is stronger than himself would, of course, also be weaker than himself, and the weaker be stronger, since the self same is spoken of in all of these cases. It must be. But it appears to me that this expression wishes to convey that there is something better and something worse associated with the soul of a particular person. And whenever the part in it that is naturally better is master of the worse, this is described as being stronger than oneself, as it is at any rate a term of praise. But whenever, through bad upbringing or company of a certain kind, the better part, which is smaller, is dominated by the sheer size of the worst part, this is censored as blameworthy and is called being weaker than oneself. And someone in this condition is said to be devoid of restraint. Yes, quite likely, said he. Well then, take a look at our new city, and you will find that one of these conditions in it, for you would be justified in saying that it is itself stronger than itself, if indeed we should refer to the city in which the better rules over the worse as sound minded and stronger than itself. Yes, I am looking, and what you are saying is true. And indeed, the numerous and variegated desires, pleasures, and pains would be found mostly in children, women, and household slaves, and in the majority of so called free men of the lowest order. Entirely so. But the simple and measured desires, which are led by reasoning, accompanied by intelligence and right opinion, are found in just a few people, those who are best by nature and those who have received the best education. True, said he. And do you not see that these are all present in your city, and that the desires of the majority, the common folk, are controlled by their desires, by the desires and the understanding of the more moderate minority? I do, said he. So if any city should be described as stronger than its pleasures and desires, and thus stronger than itself, this one should so be described. Entirely so. Should it not also be described as sound minded on the basis of all these? Very much so. And what is more, if the same opinion as to who should rule is present among the rulers and the subjects in any city, it would indeed be present in ours. Don't you think so? Very much so, definitely. So, among the two groups of citizens, would you say that sound mindedness is present whenever they hold such an opinion, and among the rulers or among the ruled? Among both, I presume. Well, do you see that our prophecy just now that sound mindedness resembles a sort of harmony was quite accurate? Why so? Because, unlike courage and wisdom, each of which are present in a particular part of the city, thus making it wise in one case and courageous in another, sound mindedness operates differently. It really extends through the whole city, through everyone, the weakest and the strongest alike, and those in the middle too. Be it in intelligence, strength, numbers, or wealth, or anything else like this. And it makes them sing the same song. And so we would be quite right to declare this unanimity to be sound mindedness, a natural concord of the worse and better as to which should rule, either in a city or in a single individual. I agree entirely, said he. There it is, said I. We have seen these three quite clearly in our city. That is how it seems at any rate, but what is the remaining form? The city would also get a share of excellence through that. So, what precisely would it be? For it is, of course, justice that remains. Of course. Now is the time, Glaucon, when we, like hunters, should surround the thicket, paying careful attention lest justice escape us, slip away, and be lost from sight. Yes, apparently, it is around here somewhere, so look out and make an effort to catch sight of it. And if you do see it before I do, then tell me. If only I could, said he, but it is better if you use me as your follower, as someone who is able to see what is pointed out quite clearly to him. Then you will be treating me fairly. Follow then, said I, and pray along with me. I shall do so. Just lead on. And yet it looks as if the terrain is hard to traverse and shadowy. It is dark indeed and hard to hunt in, but we must proceed nevertheless. Yes, we must proceed, said he. And then I spotted something and shouted, Ho, ho, Glaucon! Perhaps we have a trace of it. And so, I do not think it will escape us entirely. That is good news, said he. In fact, we are being stupid. In what way? All the while, blessed man, it appears to have been rolling about under our feet from the very outset, and yet we did not see it. We are highly comical figures, like people who sometimes look for something they are already holding in their hands, and we, instead of looking at it directly, were peering off into the distance. And that is probably why it escaped our notice. What do you mean? He asked. As follows. I think that although we have been speaking of justice and hearing about it all along, we have not understood ourselves and appreciated that in the way we have been speaking about it. For someone eager to hear you, he said, this prelude is a lengthy one. But do listen, said I, in case I have a point. Indeed, in the beginning, when we were founding our city, the rule of action that we proposed was, in my opinion, either justice or a form of justice. And we proposed, of course, and have said many times since, if you recall, that each individual should engage in one activity in the city, the one to which his own nature would be naturally be best suited. Yes, we have said this. And indeed, we have heard from many others and have often said ourselves that justice is doing what belongs to oneself and not being meddlesome. Yes, we said so. Then justice, my friend, said I, is likely to be this doing what belongs to oneself, when it occurs in a certain way. Do you know how I came to this conclusion? No, said he, please tell me. It seems to me that after considering sound mindedness, courage, and wisdom in the city, this is what is left. And this is what provides the power for all of these to come into existence. And once they have come into existence, it ensures their preservation, as long as it is present. Since we did maintain that if we were to find the other three, this would be the one left undiscovered. Yes, indeed, this must be so. Well, now, if we had to decide which of these four contributes most to making our city good, it would be difficult to decide whether it is the unanimity of opinion among the rulers and those who are ruled, or the preservation of the opinion in accordance with the law as to what things should and should not be feared, or the wisdom and guardianship inherent in the military class. Or is this what does most to make the city good? The fact that among children, among women, among slaves and free, among artisans, rulers and subjects, each individual was engaging in the one undertaking that is his own and was not being meddlesome. It would be hard to decide between them, of course. In that case, it seems that in relation to the excellence of the city, the capacity of each person in it to engage in what belongs to himself is on an equal footing with its wisdom, its sound-mindedness, and its courage. Very much so, said he. So would you propose that that what is on an equal footing with these three in terms of excellence of the city is justice? Entirely so. Then you should also consider the following argument too. Will you assign the task of judging legal disputes to those who rule the city? Of course. And do they have any other intention in passing judgment besides ensuring that no one gets what belongs to someone else and is deprived of what belongs to himself? Nothing besides this. Because this is what is just. Yes. So, we could also accept on this basis too that having or doing what's in one's own and what belongs to oneself is justice. This is so. Then let us see if this seems to you as it does to me. Suppose a carpenter attempts to do the work of a shoemaker, or the shoemaker the work of a carpenter, or they exchange tools or social status with one another, or the same person tries to engage in both activities, and all the other roles are changed too. Do you think this would greatly harm the city? Not really, said he. But whenever someone who is by nature a craftsman or some other commercial type, puffed up by wealth, numbers, strength, or anything else like this, tries to enter the military class, or a member of that class tries to enter the decision-making guardian class, undeservedly, and they interchange their instruments and social status with one another, or the same person tries to engage in all these activities at the same time, then I think you agree with me that this exchange of roles and this meddling is the ruination of the city. Yes, entirely so. So this meddling among the classes, three in number, and changing one into another is enormously harmful to the city. And this, above all, may be referred to most correctly as evil doing. Exactly so. And would you not declare that the greatest evil doing towards one's own city is injustice? Of course. So this injustice, then again, we may say that the opposite of this, the commercial, the auxiliary, and guardian classes, engaging in their own functions, each of them doing what belongs to itself in the city, would be justice, and would render a city just. Yes, said he, that is it, just so. Let us not, said I, say with complete certainty just yet. But if this form, when applied to each person individually, is also accepted by us as a justice. In that case, too, we shall concede the point at that stage. What else could we do? But if not, we shall then consider something else. But we should now complete the inquiry in which we presume that if we first attempted to observe justice in something large that possesses it, we would more easily discern the sort of thing it is in a single person. Now, we thought this large entity was a city, so we founded the best one we could, knowing full well that justice would be present in the good one. So we should apply whatever has become evident in the city to the individual. And if it corresponds, all will be well. But if something different becomes evident in the case of the individual, we should go back again to the city and put this to the test. Then, perhaps, scrutinizing them side by side and rubbing them together, we might cause justice to blaze forth like fire from a fire stick. And once it has made its appearance, we could become certain of it for ourselves. Yes, said he, that is the method, and we should do as you say. Well now, said I, if something may be described as the same, be it larger or smaller, would it turn out to be unlike in that way, in the way it described as the same? Or would it be like in that way? Like, he said. And in that case, a just man will not differ from a just city with respect to the form of justice itself. Rather, he will be like it in that respect. Like, said he. And indeed, a city seemed to be just because of the three kinds of natures present in it, each engaged in what belonged to themselves. Furthermore, it was sound-minded and courageous and wise through certain other characteristics and habits of these same classes. True, said he. And so we shall expect, my friend, on this basis, that the individual, having these same forms in his own soul, because of the same characteristics as those, rightly deserves the same names as the city. That is completely inevitable, said he. My excellent man, said I, we have stumbled into a further ordinary issue concerning the soul, whether it has these three forms within itself or not. It does not seem at all ordinary to me, said he. In fact, the saying may very well be true, Socrates, that what is good is difficult. Apparently so, Glaucon, said I, and mark my words. In my opinion, we shall never understand this in a precise manner from the sorts of methods we are now using in these arguments. For there is another path, longer and more extensive, leading to this. Yet, it may perhaps be done in a manner worthy of what has been said previously and the previous inquiries. Would not that be satisfactory, said he. Indeed, that would be enough for me, and for the moment at least. Yes, said I, it would be sufficient for me too. Then do not flag, just inquire. In that case, do we not really have to accept that the same forms and traits in the city are present in each of us? For presumably they did not get there from anywhere else. Indeed, it would be laughable if someone were to believe that the spiritedness in cities does not arrive from its private citizens, the ones who actually have this reputation, as the Thracians and Scythians do, and almost anyone else from the northern region, or indeed the love of learning that someone might attribute mostly to our own region, or the love of money, mainly associated with the Phoenicians and the people of Egypt, as some would say. Very much, said he. And this is how matters stand then, and it is not difficult to recognize. No, indeed. The difficulty at this stage concerns whether we enact each of these with the same thing or with three things, using a different one for each. Do we learn with one of the parts within us, become spirited with another, and then feel desire with some third part, concerned with the pleasures of food and procreation, and anything related to these? Or do we, in each case, act with the whole soul when we are impelled to action? These are the issues that will be difficult to determine properly. I think so too, said he. Well, there is a way to determine these in the same as one another, or different. How? It is obvious that the same thing will not at the same time do or suffer opposites, in the same respect and in relation to the same thing at any rate. And so, if we should somehow find this happening in the case of the three, we shall know that the things in question are not the same, but a number of different things. So be it. Then please consider what I am saying. Speak. Is it possible, said I, for the same thing to be stationary and moving at the same time, in the same respect? Not at all. But we should agree this even more precisely, in case we encounter some conflict as we proceed. For if someone describes a man who is stationary, but he is moving his hands and his head, and says that the same person is stationary and moving at the same time, I presume we would not think that the right way to describe this. We would say that part of him is stationary while another part is moving. Is this so? Just so. Now, if the person saying all of this were to enjoy himself even more by making subtle point that spinning tops as a whole are stationary and in motion at the same time when they are spinning around, with their center fixed in the same place, we would not accept this, because in cases like this, they are not at rest and moving about in respect of the same parts of themselves. We would say rather that they have straight and circular in them, and in respect of the straight, they are stationary, since they are not tilting in any way, while in respect of the circular, they are moving in a circle. But when the straight inclines to the right or the left, or the front or the back, and it is revolving at the same time, then it is not stationary at all. And we would be right to say so, said he. So, no assertions of this sort will bother us or persuade us to any extent that the same thing could ever experience, be, or perform two opposites at the same time, in the same respect, in relation to the same thing. Not me, at any rate, said he. Nevertheless, so that we are not compelled to drag this out by going through all possible objections of this sort, and confirm that they are not true, let us assume that this is how matters stand, and proceed, having agreed that if it ever proves otherwise, all our conclusions derived from this will have been undone. Yes, said he, that is what we should do. In that case, would you propose that assenting and dissenting, striving to get something and rejecting it, embracing and pushing away, everything of this sort are all opposites of one another, regardless of whether one does them or suffers them? For I presume that makes no difference. Yes, they are opposites. What about this? What about hunger and thirst and the general desires in general? Wanting and wishing too. Would you not, somehow, include these among those forms we just described? For example, would you not say that the soul of someone who has a desire either strives for whatever it desires or embraces whatever it wishes to obtain? Or again, insofar as it wants something to be provided, would you not say it assents to itself as if someone else were asking, and the soul was reaching out to get it? I would. What about not wishing, not wanting, not desiring? Would we not associate these with the soul's pushing away or driving away from itself, and in general, the opposites of those previous examples. Of course, this being the case, shall we maintain that desires constitute a particular class? And the most obvious of these are what we call thirst and hunger. We shall, he said. And is not one a desire for drink and the other for food? Yes. Well then, insofar as it is thirst, would it be a desire in the soul for anything more than this? Anything more than what we are saying it is a desire for? It is thirst. For instance, a thirst for hot or cold drink, or a lot or a little drink, or in short, for a certain kind of drink. Or if some heat is present in addition to the thirst, would it give desire rise to the desire for cold? And if cold is present, to the desire for hot? And if, because of the presence of much, the thirst is much, will it bring about a desire for much? And if it is little, a desire for little? Or is it the case that thirst itself will never become a desire for anything else besides what it is naturally for, namely drink, while hunger for its part is a desire for food? That is it. Each desire itself, without qualification, is only for the natural object of that desire, just that, while any additions are desires of something of this sort or something of that sort. And beware, said I, lest anyone trouble our unreflective minds by saying that no one desires drink or food, but good drink and good food, since everyone, of course, desires what is good. So if thirst is a desire, it would be for good, be it good drink or anything else. And the same holds for the other desires. Yes, said he, perhaps someone who said this might seem to have a point. Well, now, in the case of the sort of things that are related to something else, the things of a certain kind are related to something else of a certain kind, or so it seems to me, while the things just by themselves relate to themselves alone. I do not understand, said he. Do you not understand that the greater is greater in relation to something? Entirely so. And not greater in relation to the lesser. Yes. And what is much greater is much greater in relation to what is much less. Is this the case? Yes. And what is greater on occasion is so in relation to what is less on occasion. And what will be greater will be so in relation to what will be less. Of course, said he. And does the same apply to more in relation to fewer, double in relation to half, and everything else of this sort? And of course heavy in relation to light, and fast in relation to slow, and hot in relation to cold, and everything like this. Very much so. What about various kinds of knowledge? Does not the same thing apply? Knowledge is knowledge of learning itself. Knowledge is itself knowledge of learning itself, or of whatever we should propose that the object of knowledge actually is. Whereas particular knowledge of a certain kind is of something particular of a certain kind. What I mean is this: when knowledge of how to build a house arose, was it not different from the other kinds of knowledge, so that it could be referred to as house building knowledge? Of course. And was this not by its being a certain kind of knowledge, a kind that is different from any others? Yes. And was it not because of something of a certain kind that knowledge itself became knowledge of a certain kind. And does not the same apply to the other skills and kinds of knowledge? Just so. Well then, said I, if indeed you understand now, please accept that this is what I wanted to say earlier. That among things that are related to something else, these, just by themselves, relate to these just by themselves, while those of a certain kind relate to things of a certain kind. And I do not mean that they are also the sorts of things that they are related to, so that knowledge of what is healthy or diseased is healthy or diseased knowledge, and knowledge of what is bad and good is bad or good knowledge. Rather, when knowledge became not just knowledge of the object of knowledge, but of something of a certain kind, namely health or disease, then that knowledge, as a consequence, became knowledge of a certain kind, and was no longer simply called knowledge. And once the particular kind is added on, it's called medical knowledge. I understand, said he, and I think this is how matters stand. Well then, said I, in the case of thirst, would you not propose that it is one of those things that is what it is in relation to something else, and not what it is, of course, and what it is, of course, is thirst? I would, and it is in relation to drink. And is not a particular kind of thirst related to a particular kind of drink, while thirst itself is neither for much or nor little, neither for good nor bad, nor in short, for any particular kind of drink. Thirst itself is rather by nature only for drink itself. Entirely so. So for the thirsty person, insofar as it is thirsty, wants to do nothing else except drink. It yearns for this, it strives for this, of course. And in that case, if anything ever draws it away from drink when it is thirsty, would not that be something else besides the soul, within the soul, besides that which is just thirsty, and is leading it on like a wild animal to drink? For according to us, the same thing does not, at the same time, do opposite things with the same part of itself in relation to the same thing. Indeed not. So, for instance, in the case of an archer, I presume it is not appropriate to say that his hands push and pull the bow at the same time, but that one hand pushes while the other pulls. Entirely so. Now we would maintain that there are, on occasion, people who refuse to drink, although they are thirsty. Very much so, lots of them, on many occasions. Well then, what might one say about these people? Whatever bids them drink is present in their soul, is it not? And whatever forbids them to do is there too. And this is something different, which overpowers whatever bids them. I think so. Now, does not whatever forbids such actions as these arise, whenever it does arise, from reasoning? While everything that attracts and drags the soul comes about through external influences or diseases. Apparently, said so, it would not be unreasonable for us to regard these as two things, separate from one another, referring to the one by which the soul reasons as the rational part, and to the one by which it is passionate, hungry, thirsty, or is aroused by the other desires as the irrational, appetitive part, associated with certain satisfactions and pleasures. Indeed, said he, it would be reasonable for us to think so. Then we should, said I, distinguish these two forms in the soul. But what about spirit, and that which by which we become spirited? Is this a third form? Or would it be similar in nature to one or the other of these two? To one of them, perhaps, said he, to the appetitive. But I heard a story once, said I, and I believe it, that Leonidas, son of Aglion, was coming up from the Piraeus along the outside of the northern wall when he noticed corpses lying beside the public executioner, and he felt a desire to look at them. And at the same time, he was disgusted and turned himself away. And for a while he struggled and covered his face, but finally, overpowered by the desire, he opened his eyes wide and ran up to the corpses and said, "Take a look, you wretches. Have your fill of this beautiful sight." "I have heard this myself," said he. Well, this story indicates that wrath sometimes fights against the desires. One thing fighting against another. Yes, it does indicate this. Are there not many other situations, too, where desires are forcing someone to act contrary to reason, and he reviles himself and rouses his spirit against the part of himself that is forcing him, as if there are two factions, and the spirit of a person like this becomes the ally of the reasoning part, but the spirit making common cause with the desires, when reason concludes that something should not be done. I am sure you would say that you have never observed anything like this in yourself, nor, I presume, in anyone else. "No, by Zeus," said he. "But what if someone thinks that he himself is acting unjustly? Is it not the case that the more noble he is, the less able he is able to get angry because he suffers hunger or cold or anything else like that at the hands of someone who believes he is inflicting these justly? Indeed, I am saying that his spirit will not be prepared to rise up against this fellow." True. And what if someone believes he is being treated unjustly? In that case, does he not seethe with anger and fight alongside whatever seems just? And despite suffering hunger, cold, and everything of that sort, does he not endure and prevail, never forsaking all that is noble, until he has either succeeded or perished, or is called back and calmed by the reason within him, just as a dog is recalled by a shepherd? "Entirely so," said he. "It is just as you say. And of course, we installed the auxiliaries in our city, just like dogs, obedient to their rulers, the shepherds of the city. You have appreciated what I wish to explain quite well, but I wonder whether you noticed something else beside this." "What?" "That the spirited element is appearing opposite of how it did just recently, when we thought that it was something appetitive, but now, in total contrast, we are saying that when there is a conflict in the soul, it is much more inclined to deploy its weaponry in support of the rational element." "Entirely so." "Now, does it do so as something different from the rational element, or as a form of the rational element? In which case there would not be three elements in the soul, but two, the rational and the appetitive. Or is the soul just like the city, which is constituted by three classes, the commercial, the auxiliary, and the deliberative? And is the spirited element, therefore, the third thing in the soul, a natural auxiliary to the rational element, unless it gets corrupted by a bad upbringing?" "It must be a third element," said he. "Yes," said I, "provided it is shown to be different from the rational element, just as it was shown to be different from the appetitive element." "But that is not difficult to show," said he. "Indeed, even in children, you can see that although they are full of spirit as soon as they are born, some of them, in my opinion, never partake of reason, while most of them take a long time to do so." "Yes, by Zeus, you put that nicely. And even in wild animals, it can be seen that what you are saying is true. And, in addition to these examples, the extract from Homer that we quoted elsewhere will lend support. He smote his breast and rebuked his heart with the words. Since in this case, Homer has clearly made the part that has reasoned about what is better and what is worse rebuke the unreasoning spirit. It's as if they were two different things. Exactly, you are right. So, said I, we have, with some difficulty, come safely through all of this, and we have agreed that in all likelihood the same kinds are present in the city and in the soul of each individual person, and the same number, too. This is so. Well, is it not necessarily the case at this stage that in whichever way the city is wise, so too is the private citizen wise, and the element by which the city is wise is the element by which the person is wise? Of course. And is the element by which the private citizen is courageous also the element by which the city is courageous? And is the way in which one is so the way in which the other is so? And in all other cases related to excellence, must the same manner of being so, apply to both? Necessarily. Then, Glaucon, I presume, we shall maintain that a man is just in the same way that a city was just. This, too, is necessarily the case. But we surely have not forgotten that this city was just, by each of the three classes, within it doing what belongs to itself. I do not think we have forgotten, said he. Then we must remember that each of us, in whom each of the parts within us does what belongs to itself, will be just, and will be doing whatever belongs to himself. We must remember this indeed. So it is not appropriate that the rational element rule, since it is wise and exercises forethought on behalf of the entire soul, while the spirited part should be subordinate and fight by its side. Entirely so. In that case, as we were saying, does not the combination of music and gymnastic make them both harmonious, intensifying and nurturing, the one with noble words and learning, while relaxing and soothing the other, making it gentle through harmony and rhythm? Exactly, said he. And these two, then, nurtured in this way, having learned and been educated in what truly belongs to themselves, will take command of the appetitive element, which is the most extensive part of the soul in each of us, and the part that is, by nature, the most greedy for wealth. They will watch over this in case it gets too big and strong, by filling itself with the so-called pleasures of the body, and rather than doing what belongs to itself, attempts to enslave and rule over what its kind should not rule over, and overturn the entire life of everyone. Very much so, said he. And are not these two also best equipped to guard against external enemies, on behalf of the soul and body too, one giving advice and the other fighting on their behalf, following the advice of the ruling element, and carrying it out courageously? Just so. And we call each individual courageous too, I presume, because of this part. Whenever his spirited element, in the face of pain or pleasure, holds to what has been proclaimed by the words to be worthy of fear or not. And rightly so, said he. And we call him wise because of that small part, the one that ruled in him and made these proclamations, a part that has, in turn, the knowledge within itself of what is beneficial to each part and to the whole community, consisting of the three of them. Very much so, said he. What about this? Is not being sound-minded the result of the friendship and harmony among these themselves, when the ruling element and the two that are ruled share the belief that the rational element should rule, and do not make a stand against it? That is exactly what sound-mindedness is, either in a citizen or a private citizen. Then again, he will be just because of the principle we referred to on many occasions. He will be just because of this, and in this way. Yes, he really must be. Well then, what about this? Are we seeing justice any less distinctly? Does it seem to be something different from what it turned out to be in the case of the city. It does not seem different to me, said he. Indeed, in case there is any doubt still lurking inside our souls, we should make completely certain of this by applying some commonplace considerations to it. What sort? Suppose we needed to come to an understanding concerning this city, and the man who resembles it in nature and upbringing, and whether such a person would withhold a deposit of gold or silver with which he had been entrusted. Do you think anyone could believe that a man like this would do such a deed, rather than someone who is not like this? No one could, said he, and would not sacrilege, theft, betrayal of friends in his private life, or betrayal of the city in his public life be alien to this man. Alien. Nor indeed would he be unfaithful to his oaths, or any other agreements. No, how could he be? Adultery, too, neglect of parents, and disregard for the gods may be associated with anyone else, but not with a person like this. Anyone else indeed. And is it that in all these cases the explanation is that each of the elements within him does what belongs to itself in relation to ruling and being ruled? There is no other explanation, that is it. So are you still looking for justice? Is it anything else besides power which produces men of this sort, and cities too? By Zeus, said he, I am not. So our dream has finally come to maturity. The suspicion we spoke of, that as soon as we set out about founding our city, thanks to some god, we had in all probability stumbled upon the origin and some outline of justice. Yes, entirely so. And so, Glaucon, this was after all the sort of image of justice. This is why it was useful, the principle that someone who is by nature a shoemaker rightly practices shoemaking and engages in nothing else, while the carpenter engages in carpentry, and the same goes for all the others. Apparently so. Now, although justice was in truth, it seems, something of this sort, it was not anything concerned with the external activity that belongs to a person, but with the inner activity that truly concerns himself, and what belongs to himself, not permitting each element in himself to engage in activities that are alien to it, nor allowing the kinds that are in the soul to meddle in one another's functions. Rather, putting what is his own in place well and truly, ruling over and bringing order to himself, and becoming friend to himself, and harmonizing the three elements, which are really like the three defining notes of the musical scale, the highest, lowest, and middle, and any others that are in between. Having bound all of these together from many, he becomes entirely one, sound-minded and harmonious. Then, and only then, does he proceed to act, if any action is needed, either in the acquisition of wealth, or the care of the body, or indeed in civic affairs or private contracts. In all of these activities, whatever preserves and helps to bring about this condition, he regards as a just and noble action, and he names it accordingly. And the knowledge that presides over his action he calls wisdom. But whatever action consistently undoes this disposition, he calls unjust, and he calls the opinion that presides over it ignorance. What you are saying, Socrates, is entirely true. There it is. If we were to claim that we had found the just man and the just city, and what justice in them happens to be, I do not think we would seem to be telling an out-and-out lie. Indeed not, by Zeus. So, should we make this claim? We should. Let it be so then, since we should go on to consider injustice next. Obviously. Must it not, by contrast, consist in faction among these three elements, a meddlesomeness by which they do what is alien to themselves, one part rising up against the entire soul, to rule there when that is not its role, a part that is naturally suited to slavery, enslaving the part that is naturally suited to rule. These, I believe, are the sorts of things we will say. That the confusion of these elements and their going astray is injustice, lack of restraint, cowardice, or ignorance, and in short, all evil. That is exactly what they are, said he. Well then, said I, as for performing unjust actions and being unjust, and performing just actions too, isn't it clear and obvious at this stage what all of these actually are, since it is clear what injustice and justice are? How so? Because there is no difference between these two and health and disease, which are to the body as justice and injustice are to the soul. In what way? What is healthy, presumably, produces health, and what is diseased produces disease. Yes. And does not doing what is just produce justice, and doing what is unjust produces injustice, necessarily. And producing health consists of establishing the elements of the body so that they control and are controlled by one another according to nature, while producing disease consists of establishing them so that they rule and are ruled by one another contrary to nature. Yes, that is it. So, would not producing justice for its part consist in establishing the elements in the soul, so that they control and are controlled by one another according to nature, while producing injustice will consist in establishing them so that they rule and are ruled by another contrary to nature? Exactly. So excellence, it seems, would be a sort of health, beauty and vigor of the soul, while vice would be disease, disgrace, and weakness. Just so. Now, is it not the case that noble activities lead to the acquisition of excellence, while disgraceful ones lead to vice? Necessarily. Then what remains for us to consider at this stage, it seems, is whether it is indeed profitable to do what is just, engage in noble actions, and be just, or whether such behavior goes unnoticed or not, or, on the other hand, to act unjustly, or to be unjust, provided one does not pay a penalty, or become a better person by being punished. But Socrates, said he, that consideration, as I see it, is already becoming absurd. If it implies that life is not worth living when the nature of the body is corrupted, even if the person is surrounded by food and drink of every sort, huge wealth and enormous power, yet implies that life indeed will be worth living, when this very nature by which we live is confounded and corrupted, provided the person does as he wishes, and avoids anything by which he will banish evils and injustices, and acquire justice and excellence, especially since these have turned out to be as we have described them. Absurd indeed, said I, but nevertheless, since we have come far enough to see quite clearly that this is how matters stand, we should not flag at this stage. No, by Zeus, we should not flag at all, not in the least. Come here, then, so that you may behold how many forms this evil has, in my opinion. Those that are worthy of note, at any rate. I am following, just speak. Well, then, it appears to me, from our present viewing point, so to speak, having ascended to this level of argument, that there is one form of excellence, and that the forms of evil are without limit, although there are 4 of them that are worth mentioning. How do you mean? These are probably as many types of soul as there are types of government, with a particular form. How many? 5 types of government and 5 types of soul. Well, tell me what types. I say that one type of government is the one we have been describing, although it is given 2 names. For when one exceptional individual arises among those who rule, it is referred to as kingship, and when there is more than one, an aristocracy. True. Well, I am saying that this is one form. For whether one person or a number arises, they would not alter the laws of the city worth mentioning, provided they have the recourse to the upbringing and education we have described. Yes, that is most unlikely, said he. And there we end Book 4, which is good because I was getting concerned about time. I don't have a whole lot to add to this, right? We have been describing justice and injustice, and I've already said that I find justice to be in the doing, so this is absolutely right along with what I've already said. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up so that we get this upload done nice and smoothly. Y'all make sure y'all get back and check out the the dialogues of Plato, translated by David Horan. The link is provided down below. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.